And welcome back. We're on day 2 of the Tennessee EMS Education Association Conference in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. And our two-time guest now for the podcast here, we bring back Mr. Steve Wirth of Page, Wilbur and Wirth, the EMS Legal Super Extraordinary.
Wow. It's hard to live up to that.
Well,
Thank
you. Hey, but hey, whenever you get a chance to get somebody like you, we try to get as much, glean as much as we possibly can. So you're in the process of getting ready to transition to the airport and go on to the next realm
assignment, right?
But before you do, we're gonna move on. So
Great, thank you, Dave.
In yesterday's topics, we were talking about some of those cases, and I'm going to use one of those quotes again. You're just one call away from a $10 million settlement, and as you kind of alluded to, not only a $10 million settlement, but now possible criminal charges.
Yeah, right. And we're seeing that in the last year or two. We've seen paramedics and EMS practitioners being accused of criminal conduct in terms of their negligence, so to speak, being criminalized, or failure to follow treatment protocols being seen as a criminal violation in several cases recently. The one most recent one that's gotten the most attention is the case involving Mr. Earl Moore Jr. in Illinois, where he died. He was brutally treated very disrespectfully, as you can see on the police body cams, and he was literally thrown onto a stretcher in a prone position, cinched down like a sack of potatoes, and died shortly after arrival at the emergency department. So, yeah, and those two EMS providers are charged with first-degree murder under Illinois law. So even though it's not terribly common, this is the first time, in the last year or so that we've seen criminal charges filed against EMS practitioners for their conduct and behavior toward patients under the patient care scenario, which is different. In the past, we have seen criminal charges filed against EMS practitioners for things like assaulting a patient, sexual assault, sexual abuse. Those are very egregious kinds of things.
Outside of the patient care realm.
Outside of the patient care realm of the traditional patient.
Right.
Now we're talking about
patient care, actually.
Their activities, in performing patient care, or lack of activities, which is a better way to look at it, as being potentially criminal activity. Yeah, so that's what we talked about the Earl Moore case, and some tips on how to, what causes that kind of thing from even happening, that kind of behavior, which is pretty bad, and then, what steps we can do to prevent it.
And so I think right now we're talking EMS, and we're going to Earl Moore, but this is something that you need to look at that's actually a little bit more. Here in Tennessee, there was a case against a nurse at a hospital system that ended up taking significant issues. So this is happening more and more. So it's definitely in healthcare something that we need to take a look at. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. So as you mentioned, the whole encounter with the Earl Moore case based on the police cameras, and that's really what we need to look at, is the fact that that's the evidence that we have.
Right. This is they're charged with first-degree murder. They're innocent until proven guilty.
Right.
We don't have all the facts. Our firm's not involved in the case whatsoever, so we just have the facts that are available, through the public sources. And there's 3 body cam videos that are available that you can view. And watching. There are 2 EMS responders on the call. The female responder went in the house. The male stayed out with the stretcher. She came in the back room where the police officers were with Mr. Moore, where he was hallucinating, extremely diaphoretic, totally incoherent, unable to help himself at all, really. And she just literally walks in with a notepad and a pen, no equipment, nothing, and
so it really
goes downhill from there.
It really goes back to what we talked about yesterday.
Yes.
There was a lack of empathy, lack of compassion.
Yes, total lack of empathy.
Because while they may have gone lights and sirens in a hurry, they weren't ready to do anything.
Yeah, the EMT basically saying, "Come on, get up. We're not carrying you to the stretcher. You got to walk." It's very. I don't have time to play with you. I'm done with this. I don't have time for this crap. I'll use that word instead of the word she actually used. in the video. So yes, disrespect, not treating Mr. Moore as a ill patient, not even treating him as a fellow human being. Literally, they treated him like a sack of potatoes, literally, and that's bad news.
So let's look at her action. I mean, she throws the paper down as part of that.
Yeah.
So we talked yesterday about hiring individuals, and are there signs and things that are probably there for agencies prior to this interaction occurring?
Right.
So there may be more in this case that need to be looked at.
This is the tip of the iceberg, I think, for EMS leadership to really look at everything within their organization. Because if we're really honest with ourselves, and I've asked a lot of EMS leaders, hey, we've seen this kind of negative, disrespectful behavior before, just not to this extreme, to the point where you totally disregard human life and throw the patient down prone, which we know we should never do. So there are, burnout, apathy, laziness, people are being overworked and underpaid, okay? They're stressed out from COVID and all the demands placed on EMS because we were the most reliable part of the healthcare system. Let's face it, we were available 24/7, 365, and they called us to do everything, And then on top of that, we got social unrest and all the stuff going on in the news with how police officers have handled certain situations. And now that is, the society we live in today is very polarized. So people are really not as friendly as they used to be to some extent. We're dealing with all these stresses. So, it's a compounding problem. And I think a lot of it has to do with making sure that we hire people who respect human life and who actually want to work with other people. Some people just aren't cut out for this,
So as we look at this case and the charges that they've been charged with, I think it's also important people need to understand that they're being charged under Illinois law.
That's right.
And your state laws may be slightly different than the Illinois state law.
Very, very good point, Bradley, to bring up, because under crimes codes, every state has its own crimes codes, criminal codes, and they vary from state to state. The Illinois statute for first-degree murder is pretty broad. In other words, they could charge you for more than just intent to kill another human being. And the common notion is you only get charged for first-degree murder if you actually intended, like premeditated, intended to kill another human being. Here in Illinois, that's the first part. You can get, of course, charged for intent to kill another human being, but you can also be charged with first-degree murder in Illinois for when you know that your conduct could cause the death of another human being. So in other words, the issue here is, did they know that their conduct could have caused Mr. Moore's death? That's really what the prosecutor has to prove. And, they're starting to look at things like, did they know about prone positioning, that you should never put a patient in that position? Gee, there's evidence coming out that they had training on that 6 months ago, So it's sort of like, we all know this, right? And, did they know that what they were doing or not doing could have caused severe harm or death to Mr. Moore? And that's what it's a tough thing to prove, too, by the way.
And I will make a very broad statement here that complacency kills.
Oh, yes, complacency kills.
Now, the other part of it is, I don't think either one of them woke up that morning and said, hey, we're going to go screw somebody's life up today.
No.
I don't think that was the intent. I think what happened was due to a lack of that empathy and compassion we talked about. So,
well, that's a good point. Let's talk about that for a minute, because, this is why everybody needs to be concerned about this case. Because I've talked to some people who have said, oh, well, these are just bad apples, and we just need to rid the system of the bad apples. Well, good people do bad things. You may have hundreds of calls you've been on where you've treated somebody with respect and empathy, and then there's that one call because it's the 15th call of the shift, and you're on the end of a 24-hour shift, and you're burned out, tired, and exhausted, and your nerves are frayed, and the patient does something to set you off, okay? Or they're intoxicated and they spit on you, or, and that's the problem, because we all have seen this concern, this behavior where we, as EMS professionals, have sometimes lashed out at the patient, and that's why everybody's got to be concerned about this case.
So if there's evidence that's coming out that says they had training, 6 months prior, you shouldn't, position somebody prone. So then they turn around and do it. Is that potential malpractice? Is that negligence?
Well, that would certainly qualify for negligence, I would think, not following the standard of care. And if they had knowledge of the standard of care that they should have followed and didn't follow it, and harm resulted because of that. Yes, now the question is, does that now extend to criminal conduct as well? And like I said, under Illinois, it says that if you knew that your conduct could cause harm or death, that could meet the elements for conviction under first-degree murder charge. Personally, I think this is a bit of an overreach by the prosecutors, but we all know that a lot of these cases of people in uniform treating citizens poorly that we've seen in the last few years. It's not just Earl Moore, it's George Floyd, it's Tyree Nichols, it's going back to Eric Garner years ago. There's other cases as well, lesser-known cases, Elijah McClain, all these, that we're under the microscope and that everybody is watching us. And now prosecutors, who are also politicians, they're getting outcry from citizens, especially when the body camera footage ends up on YouTube and people can see it and they look at it and they go, I mean, everyone who looked at that video, as I'm sure you did, you went, oh my God, look what they just, it's horrible, it's disgusting, it's terrible. And now, and that gets to the prosecutors who think, well, there's an outcry, we got to do something about it.
And so, when I first watched it, there were lots of things that went through my mind, and I was thinking, man, this is horrible and everything else. But at the same time, I also wonder, are some places allowing that culture? So we've got to look at the culture of an organization as well, and has that behavior become their accepted?
Right. It's sort of that phrase of what you allow will continue. And that's another lesson learned from this case by looking at it is we need to have good supervisors who watch their people. We have to have team members who call each other out if the other team member is having a bad day and engaging in bad behaviors toward a patient or other human beings. And like in this case, if you watch it, there's police officers there who initially were there before EMS arrived. Mr. Moore is thrashing around there and diaphoretic and hallucinating, and they were respectful toward him. Then, Peggy comes in and is very disrespectful. They could have said something to her. They could have said, hey, maybe you ought to take a breath and start over, and that's the kind of intervention that we all have to, as professionals, engage in when one of us is having a bad day. So if you and I are working, Brad, and I'm having a bad day, and I'm lashing out and yelling at a patient, you need to say something, right then, if my conduct could harm the patient then, or at least right afterwards, and say, hey, Steve, you really had a problem taking care of that patient, and we can't do that, whatever. And same thing, if you do something, it's my professional obligation. Letting it continue and looking the other way, or following the old adage, what happens on the truck stays on the truck, and nothing is said about these things, that's a problem. And that's part of that culture thing you're talking about, and that has to be communicated from the top down in the organization. I think it really does.
Well, and I believe it also needs to be covered in additional education. We do a disservice to a lot of our students by teaching them, and then instead of meeting them where they are, and then showing them that empathy and that compassion. And I've heard instructors and I've heard supervisors say before, well, patient gets a little unruly, go back to the truck, a little O2 therapy doesn't hurt.
Yeah, like with the oxygen tank.
Right, the tank. Right. And that is the wrong approach. It's the wrong thing to say, because then those thoughts begin to enter a person's mind. What you harbor is a culture. What's the culture becomes?
That's right, and that's a very good point you make. And at the end of the day, we just need to be respectful toward people, and we need to have that initial training. For example, we do a lot of practical skills trainings on mock codes, mega codes, MCIs, scenarios dealing with trauma victims. We have the mannequins and all that stuff, and we do role plays. But when do we do role plays dealing with intoxicated patients, mental health patients, difficult patients, difficult interactions with police and law enforcement at the scene? We don't practice those kinds of interactions, and that's a majority of the call we run on these days. It's not the heavy-duty trauma or cardiac arrest. It's the kind of difficult scenarios of patients who are distressed mentally, under the influence of alcohol or drugs, or in custody.
Yeah.
Now what? When does that person become a patient? We need to work with law enforcement and with our own people to really work on de-escalation techniques and basic communication skills. Like in this case, she never got down and knelt down to look at Mr. Moore. She was standing over him, yelling at him. That's the kind of thing we can do.
Yeah, it's those soft skills
Yeah,
that we end up missing with everybody. And the whole part of that soft skills, it's difficult to teach that. But at the same time, we've got to really, not that I want to keep bringing up the pandemic, there for a good 2 years, you heard everybody stay away, isolate yourself, quarantine.
Yes.
What we should have said is we should maintain physical distance while remaining socially connected.
I like that. That's a very good phrase. I'm glad we recorded that phrase because I like that. I might want to use that.
So,
socially distant, staying connected.
Yeah, physically
distant,
but socially connected.
Yes.
Because we are a social animal.
That's right.
And if we don't have that interaction, some people want to play with themselves, some people want to do that. But when you get up in the morning, I don't care if you kick the cat, if you run over the dog, if you spilt your coffee, you've got to kick in the door smiling when you go to the patient's house.
That's right. You got it right. Put the smiles on and be positive, upbeat. And that might be the first time and only time they ever experience EMS too. So it's that first impression too that makes a big difference too in the whole way that whole engagement goes with the patient, family.
So there are a couple of cases that are out there. So there was one in Pennsylvania with a 911 call.
Right.
So when basically that 911 call came in, the guy was trying to convey that his wife was unresponsive, and then there were some issues.
Well, I think in that case, he was sort of a frequent caller. So, and it's interesting, the negative attitudes and behaviors in the field. You can have the same thing in the dispatch stats with how you treat the caller. And basically in this particular case, is dispatcher saying, is he going to go to the hospital this time? Is he going to go if I send EMS? Sort of like directly saying, look, I'm not going to send the ambulance unless he said he's going to go. And that's not part of the dispatch protocol system on screening calls. Having the caller agree that the patient's definitely going to go to the hospital by ambulance. I never saw that in any dispatch procedure or protocol. And it was just, again, the attitudes and negative behaviors can be seen in all aspects of the organization. In the field, in the comm center, in the billing office, the elderly person calls in and the person comes out of a bad day and doesn't treat the person. With respect. Yeah. So we need to work on this whole process of positive communication.
So what are some action steps to prevent tragedy like this from occurring?
Yeah, I think first we need to recognize that a lot of these cases, there's a lot going on with respect to inherent biases, unconscious biases, the color of a person's skin, the socioeconomic status, the neighborhood they're in. We all have these notions. How often they've called an ambulance before. Immediately, those things, because we see people in their worst moments, they're not very nice to us sometimes, and then we start to think the next patient is going to be the same way toward us, and then we treat them. So we got to recognize unconscious bias if we have in all of us. Okay, we have it all. We all have it, and be aware of that. Number one. Number two, to really train on how to interact and how to de-escalate difficult situations where patients are not cooperative and being disrespectful toward us. We got to make sure that people recognize we shouldn't be retaliating against the patient. Like you said, the oxygen therapy via bottle, hitting them with a bottle is not the way to go. But yes, those kinds of things happen. And emphasizing training, policy, how we treat people, having conduct says we treat everybody with respect and decency, regardless of the situation, and regardless of whether they put themselves in that bad situation or not. We tend to be, as human beings, we tend to be judgmental. That's kind of the nature of our being. We look at things, we assess them, and we make judgments. Well, we don't want to judge people because maybe they did themselves. That they don't deserve the same care as somebody who did not cause their own problem. And we see that with people with addiction, drug and alcohol, there's a tendency to not treat them as well as we should, as we would other needs.
Yeah, and talk about the biases. During our paramedic crew chief class that we run as we work to train people to be able to basically take care of them, the partner, and who's on the street. I talk a little bit about biases and a couple of those things, and so I give them an address. The address does not exist, but the neighborhood does. So and I said, you see a call about cat hasn't been assigned an HO yet. They're taking their call. They've got the address. What are your thoughts? It's in your first date. Yeah. And they always go, oh, it's an overdose.
Yeah. So the address, the neighborhood. Yeah, exactly. And there's many cases out where that kind of prejudging, the patient before you even get there. Or I've seen it, I call it diagnosis of the windshield. A man down, person down on the sidewalk, a frequent flyer, sometimes all of them. He's going to sleep and well, it could be much more serious than this. You're right. That's a good way to get to that. That's how you change awareness about these biases that live in our brains.
So what are some of the consequences of bad patient care?
Well, typical things we've seen is, things like licensure, revocation, an EMT paramedic complaint filed against them, and now they got to go through that investigation. Individual paramedics, these people lose their license. We have claim denials. Denials are because the care wasn't provided by standard medicine. That's required. Medicare and other health care payers are starting to say more often, we're not going to pay this because you didn't need standard care. Civil liability is the typical thing, negligence and wrongful death, some of these kinds of things, and ultimately, harm and death to the patient. That's the ultimate worst costs of bad patient care. And now, as we see in recent cases, potential criminal charges are filed against the EMS practitioners. So it happens. David just mentioned moments ago. It's not just nursing. It's other areas of healthcare. She mentioned Tennessee, right here, state, involving a nurse given a proper incorrect drug. A very potent drug that knocked the patient out to the point of cardiac arrest and complete acknowledgement drug error being made, and she got convicted of criminal homicide.
So let's adjust what we talked about worker liability, civil liability. What about liability of the agents? Curious liability.
Yeah, very good. You got the legal phrase. Agencies are liable for the action of agents, paramedics, and
That. So yeah, Gary's liability on some of the agency. Of course, the big pocket is the agency ambulance company. Or the organization. So yes, they could be liable for the actions of paramedics or negligent or criminally, civilly negligent or criminal negligence. And there's also claims such as negligent hiring, negligent retention of employees who shouldn't be kept around, negligent supervision, another common law legal claim brought against agencies as well. So and of course they're the ones that have pocket insurance, coverage for liability. So it's the agency who's going to be the agency ends up being the one to pay out usually.
Now, in the Earlmore case, was the agency named part of that?
Well, because criminal individual, right, criminal charge. But I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah. There are some cases where the criminal action against the company usually gets individual. So the two individuals charged criminally, but there is also a civil lawsuit that has been filed against these companies in that case. Yes.
Now, were the officers named at all?
I don't know.
Okay. Because I haven't been able to that.
I haven't either, and I'm not aware of the actual civil lawsuits filed.
Yeah, I'm more interested in criminal aspect.
Exactly. Okay.
So for both providers and the agencies that are out there, they are innocent until proven guilty.
Right. On the criminal side, the standard is it has their crime against them, charged against them. That has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. That's a high standard to me. So they are of course innocent, proven guilty by every court. Okay. I personally think that in a lot of these cases, prosecutors are overreaching a bit. I think we could be concerned as we did with the case in Tennessee, where there's an association, many people, were there at the courthouse day for sentencing, in support for her. Because now I think we're going down a terrible path of criminalizing negligence. And we start making medical mistakes happen. It's like the fourth leading cause of death in the United States. Okay? But when you criminalize that and threaten people to be jailed because of negligence, extreme negligence, what's that going to do to people who want to enter the healthcare? So they're going to say, I want to do this. So there's a fine line there. I think we certainly from the criminal side, these are tough cases to prove. I think you're going to see plea bargains and some dismissals perhaps, some of these charges in some of these cases. But on the civil side, that standard is easier to prove civil wrong or civil damage against an agency or an individual independent negligence. That's by the preponderance of this, not beyond a reasonable doubt. Preponderance of this, and you're not getting jail time. You're paying money damages. So there's a big difference.
And one of the afraid of criminalizing some of these actions is from the quality improvement side. And as we're errors, so we can figure out, let's break this down. Did this happen because of a system error, or did this happen because the individual didn't follow the right. Well, two different things.
You are not on comment because that was an issue with nurses in Tennessee. She reported the errors. Okay, she admitted the errors. So now she gets charged criminally. Okay. So that's going to deter people from doing medical. So you don't want to do that. It's going to deter. It'd be contrary to the notion of quality improvement, peer review, all those things. Talking about doing. Everybody's going to be saying anything, reporting anything. Because it could turn into criminal accusation. It's not a good thing. I think conduct in some of these cases you mentioned is very egregious. I think it's totally unacceptable. Patients harmed or died as a result at the hands of EMS providers. Okay, that's terrible. Okay, but on the other hand, you gotta be careful down that road. Violations of protocols and medical mistakes that happen.
And a couple of things don't know the Earl Moore case. What he says, that's what we don't know. Was he a cardiac arrest on arrival, or did he happen or sometimes after it? And then what documented the bill?
We haven't seen patient care report. There was radio traffic recorded. She Peggy indicating in time that she was vital signs, but she wasn't going to bear strange. Did not engage patient in that based on that state assume that a lot needs to come out. I think we're going to see a lot more evidence come out. But the bottom line, Brad, is that the best evidence is the videos. It's almost like being you got audio and video, real time. You got three body cams in that room, Mr. Moore and Peggy Finn, and that is telling. We tell people we do our training. Seminar here in Tennessee is always act like this thing is on. This camera running. The minute you pull out of the station, they don't want to go on the call even. But they're watching you even as you approach the scene, and how you act and walk, and how you engage people. That's all going to be recorded. And if it's not a body cam, it's going to be a citizen or bystander, family member. It's one of these. There's nothing new about it. You got to act as if that camera's on all the time.
And it's a very good for all of our people that are listening. And I want to ask, whether you realize it or not, I think somebody was doing some research, about 56 times a day.
That makes sense.
I mean, whether it's a traffic cam, whether it's a
hotel lobby cam. There's one over there.
So I mean, you're always on camera now. So this prosecutor, as a process, you said something during the presentation, and I'm glad some notes about how does the prosecutor decide how guilty your mind is.
Yeah, they find out guilty based on intent. They goal is to figure out what you were thinking. Because criminal conduct is based on intent. Intent to do this. Intent to violate the law. That's the difference between negligence, civil wrongs. But they look at all the evidence. They look at the witness testimony from other people, providers, your partner, police officers in the scene, the patient care report, hospital records, the autopsy report. All these things come into play in terms of determining your intent. What you say under oath and testimony. About your action. But the best evidence of intent, frankly, is body cam. The audio and the visual. You're watching the person's conduct then and there. So that's pretty strong evidence to use. And I'm sure that is likely what the prosecutor pointed to the realm of criminal charges against these two.
Yeah. So looking at that and going through everything, just remember, you're always on camera. That might show a little bit of intent. Looking at her actions and
his actions. He's the one who really threw Mr. Moore on the stretcher, his face down, and strapped those straps up.
Which was a little tough.
Everybody gasped. See that? It's like, oh my goodness, that's horrible.
So for our listeners, any final thoughts or anything that you want to?
No, I think like you made some really good points here about culture. about always doing the right thing, always being kind and respectful to each other, whether it's people working with, patients or others. I think those are things that are very, very important. And get help. You know, if you're having a bad day, I think agencies we didn't really touch upon as much, but really need to support mental health and well-being of our EMS providers. Companies need to provide the services. We don't know in this war case. You know, there's some indication that was many calls later in the shift. You know, and it was 17th or 18th call. Okay. Well, that doesn't excuse the behavior, but it helps explain something and how someone could act disrespectfully. So we really need to make sure our people have the help they need and the support they need. Because this is tough work, you know, and it takes a toll on your mental health and your physical health as well. So I think we need to really address that as well.
Yeah, and you know, for those that are out there, you know, take the time, watch each other. Remember, you're pretty much always on camera, and as you go throughout the day, continue evaluating where you are in your mindset and everything else. So if you would, for those of you that are watching this live, thanks. For those of you that are watching this later, make sure you go rate, review, subscribe, and always remember the value of your EMS handoff. Thank you. We good?